A mentor sabotages their rising star mentee, only to realize their own jealousy is their downfall. It began with applause, loud echoing applause that rattled the walls of the lecture hall. Alara Vance, 38 tall, with a sharp jawline and an impeccable black suit, had just finished watching her protégé, 24-year-old Adrian Cole, give a presentation that left the audience spellbound. His crisp white shirt, rolled sleeves, and youthful confidence painted him as someone destined for greatness. Alara smiled outwardly, but inside, something ugly stirred. That applause wasn't for her, it was for him. She told herself she was proud. After all, she had molded him. She'd been the one who saw potential in him when others overlooked him. But beneath that pride was a quiet, creeping resentment. Adrian had something she could never get back. Time. He was young, magnetic, and unafraid to take risks, and the world loved him for it. The thought festered like a thorn in her chest. In the days that followed, Alara noticed how the senior executives lingered around him, asking for his opinion, inviting him to events she was once the first to attend. Each time, her smile grew tighter. She began to think, what if Adrian didn't make it? What if he stumbled? The idea was intoxicating. Alara's mentorship began to change, almost imperceptibly. The coffee she once brought him before early meetings stopped arriving. The casual check-ins became curt, transactional. She still offered advice, but it was laced with misdirection. Small errors that would seem like harmless mistakes. Don't bother rehearsing too much. Spontaneity is key, she'd say before an important pitch. The client prefers minimal detail, she'd add. Knowing full well they valued comprehensive reports, Adrian, ever trusting, didn't question her guidance. Why would he? She had been his greatest supporter, the one who had opened doors for him. He followed her lead, still eager to please, yet cracks began to show. A client meeting went poorly. A report was criticized for lacking depth. Adrian felt off balance, but he chalked it up to the natural pressures of rising success. He didn't see Alara's quiet smirk as she watched him falter, but her satisfaction was fleeting. Each misstep of his only reminded her of the applause he had once received, applause she couldn't erase. If he truly fell, would that finally silence the comparison in her mind? Alara's jealousy deepened into something darker. Her advice became deliberate sabotage. She accidentally sent him outdated data for a major proposal. She introduced him to influential figures, only to subtly undermine his credibility with carefully chosen words. Adrian's brilliant, but sometimes a bit impulsive, she'd say with a light laugh, letting the implication linger. Meanwhile, she began stepping into opportunities meant for him, framing it as taking the pressure off his shoulders. In truth, she wanted the spotlight back, even if only for a moment. Adrian began to notice the odd coincidences. Why were his numbers always off? Why did clients suddenly seem hesitant after meeting him? His instincts whispered something was wrong, but his loyalty to Alara muted his suspicions. He owed her everything. At least that's what he thought. What Alara didn't realize was that her actions were being noticed, not by Adrian, but by others. A colleague, quiet and observant, had started piecing things together. And if the truth came to light, the applause Alara craved would turn into condemnation. The opportunity that could define Adrian's career came in the form of an international summit. He was invited to deliver the keynote address, a slot reserved for industry leaders twice his age. Alara congratulated him warmly, but her mind was already working. This was too big. If Adrian succeeded, her relevance would evaporate. In the weeks before the summit, she took over certain preparations, insisting she could help manage the workload. She altered key slides, removed critical data, and encouraged Adrian to focus on an untested angle that would alienate half the audience. On the day of the summit, Adrian stood before a packed hall, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue tie sharp against his white shirt. The first few minutes went smoothly, until the gaps in his data appeared. Questions from the audience became aggressive, skeptical. Adrian's confidence cracked. He stumbled through his closing remarks, leaving the stage to polite but restrained applause. Backstage, Alara feigned sympathy, offering a comforting pat on his shoulder. Inside, she felt an unsettling mix of relief and guilt. She had done it, but the hollow feeling in her chest told her this victory was already rotting. The fallout from the summit was swift. Rumors spread about Adrian's unpreparedness, his reckless presentation. Some even questioned if his earlier successes had been overblown. Alara found herself back in the circle of influence, invited to private meetings and consulted for her experience. But not everyone was convinced by her act. Maren Holt, a 32-year-old analyst with keen brown eyes and a habit of noticing the small things, had seen the altered slides. She had overheard Alara's offhand comments that subtly chipped away at Adrian's reputation. She didn't yet have proof, but she had suspicion, and suspicion could grow teeth. One evening, Marin approached Adrian in the quiet of the nearly empty office. She asked him if he'd ever considered that the setbacks weren't just bad luck. The idea shocked him. He laughed it off at first, but something about her steady gaze made him pause. If what she hinted at was true, then the person he trusted most might have been the one tightening the noose around his career. And for the first time, Adrian felt the first cold bite of doubt. Adrian couldn't shake Marin's words. They followed him like a whisper in the hallways, between the hum of the fluorescent lights and the quiet shuffle of papers. Each interaction with Alara felt different now. Her smiles seemed just a fraction too sharp, her praise almost rehearsed. He started paying attention. He noticed how her mistakes always appeared at the worst possible moments, how her version of the truth, when repeated to others, always cast him in a slightly weaker light. These weren't random accidents, they were patterns. But Adrian knew he couldn't confront her without proof. Alara was respected, even feared, by some in the office. Her network was strong, and her reputation spotless on paper. If he accused her without evidence, he would only look paranoid, perhaps even unstable. Instead, Adrian began quietly collecting his own data. He saved emails, recorded meeting notes, and kept copies of the original files before Alara's edits. The more he gathered, the heavier the weight in his chest became. Marin, seeing his growing awareness, offered to help. Together, they formed a silent pact: find the truth, no matter how deep they had to dig. But Alara was not someone who let go of control easily. She would feel the shift, and she would act. Alara prided herself on being able to read people, and she could sense that something in Adrian had changed. He no longer came to her with the same unguarded enthusiasm. His questions were more precise, his eyes sharper, as if weighing every word she spoke. She didn't like it. Her mind raced. Had he begun to suspect? Or worse, was someone else whispering doubts into his ear? The idea made her pulse quicken with a blend of fear and anger. She had worked too hard to position herself where she was. Adrian's downfall was supposed to be clean, quiet. In a calculated move, she began to play the role of the supportive mentor again, offering helpful advice, sharing contacts, even congratulating him in front of others. It was a performance meant to disarm him, to make him question his own suspicions. But beneath that mask, she began working on a final blow, something that would not only end his credibility, but also push him entirely out of the industry. And this time, there would be no trail leading back to her. The opportunity came disguised as an honor. An influential investor from abroad, known for funding groundbreaking projects, reached out to Adrian after hearing about his early work. They invited him to a private dinner to discuss a potential partnership. The email had come through Alara's contacts, forwarded with a warm note. "This could be the turning point you've been waiting for." Adrian was cautious. He didn't know if this was genuine or another setup, but the investor's reputation was too significant to ignore. Marin urged him to go, but to take precautions. She suggested he keep records of every message and conversation, just in case. On the night of the dinner, Adrian arrived in his tailored navy suit, nerves coiled tight in his stomach. The investor, a silver-haired man named Victor Doran, greeted him with charm and enthusiasm. The conversation flowed easily at first, but soon turned to technical details Adrian hadn't been briefed on. Halfway through, Adrian realized the numbers Victor quoted were wrong, wildly wrong, and somehow the data they were discussing was tied to a proposal Adrian had never written. It felt like a trap, and he suspected he knew who had set it. By the time the dinner ended, Adrian's mind was racing. If this proposal was traced back to him, it would look like fraud. And with Victor's influence, the damage would spread quickly through the industry. The next morning, an email arrived from Victor's assistant, politely declining any further discussion and citing serious concerns about data integrity. Within hours, rumors began swirling online. An anonymous post accused Adrian of falsifying project reports. Alara's reaction was flawless, concerned, disappointed, and reluctant to speak ill of her student. She made sure her tone implied nothing, yet every sentence she spoke carried a subtle undertone. "I warned him about rushing into things." Adrian knew this was her work. The timing, the access to his files, the deliberate targeting of his credibility, it all pointed back to her. But knowing and proving were two very different things. He realized that if he didn't act soon, she would win, and his career would be over. Marin, who had been quietly investigating in the background, decided it was time to strike. She proposed a risky move, bait Alara into making one last mistake, one that could be documented beyond denial. The plan involved a fabricated, high-profile opportunity, supposedly coming from a government agency looking for fresh talent. They would plant the offer through channels Alara could access, making it seem like a real chance for Adrian to redeem himself. If their theory was correct, Alara wouldn't be able to resist interfering, and this time, they'd have surveillance in place to capture every step. Adrian hesitated. It felt dangerous, almost deceitful to set up his former mentor. But Marin's words were sharp. She's already destroyed parts of your career. You can't fight someone who plays dirty by playing clean. With the clock ticking and his reputation hanging by a thread, Adrian agreed. The game was about to turn, and for the first time, Alara wouldn't be the only one pulling the strings. The fake opportunity was crafted with meticulous precision. Marin used her network to create a believable cover, a formal invitation, a polished website, and an official-looking project brief from the Department of Innovative Infrastructure. The role was prestigious, lucrative, and required exclusive confidential preparation materials. Adrian played his part perfectly. He printed the offer and left it casually on his desk, just visible enough for Alara to spot if she wandered by. In conversations, he dropped hints about being overwhelmed with the level of detail the project demanded. He even pretended to hesitate about whether he could meet the deadline. The hook was baited. Now they needed Alara to bite. Sure enough, within 2 days she began asking questions. Too many questions. "Are you sure you're ready for something like that?" she'd ask with a polite smile. "Those agencies are strict. One misstep can ruin your standing permanently." Adrian responded with vague confidence, feeding her just enough to make her believe this was his last, desperate grasp at redemption. What she didn't know was that every file she would touch, every change she might make was already being tracked and logged in real time. Alara's restraint didn't last long. The thought of Adrian securing such a high-profile role twisted in her mind like a splinter. One evening, long after most of the office had gone home, she slipped into his workspace under the pretense of retrieving a forgotten folder. She plugged in a small USB drive, one she'd used many times before, to correct a few details in his project documents. In truth, she planted errors so subtle yet devastating that any reviewing committee would flag the work as unacceptable. What she didn't realize was that Marin had set up a remote monitoring program, quietly capturing every keystroke and timestamp. The screen recordings showed everything, from the moment Alara opened the files to the second she deleted legitimate data and replaced it with false figures. When she left the office that night, Alara felt a grim satisfaction. In her mind, she had just sealed Adrian's fate once and for all, but in reality, she had walked directly into the trap. The following morning, Marin shared the footage with Adrian in the privacy of an empty conference room. The proof was irrefutable. Clear video of Alara altering his files, her reflection even visible in the darkened monitor. Every detail was backed by metadata showing the exact time, date, and device used. Adrian's stomach churned as he watched. Part of him had hoped, even after everything, that maybe Marin had been wrong, that maybe Alara's betrayals were just coincidences twisted by suspicion. But the truth was staring back at him, undeniable and cold. The question now was how to use it. Marin suggested taking it straight to the board of directors. Adrian, however, hesitated. Publicly destroying Alara would be messy, and she still had powerful allies. But waiting was dangerous. If she sensed they had evidence, she might spin the story before they could act. For the first time in months, Adrian felt in control, but the next step would decide whether he reclaimed his career or lost everything. Adrian decided on a more personal approach first. Late one afternoon, he asked Alara to join him in one of the smaller meeting rooms. The blinds were drawn, the air heavy with unspoken tension. He slid a laptop across the table and pressed play. At first, Alara's expression was unreadable, until she saw herself on the screen, fingers moving across his files. Her eyes flicked up to his, searching for some sign of mercy. "You've been undermining me for months," Adrian said, his voice low but steady. "Every mistake, every failure, I thought it was me. But it was you." Alara straightened, her face hardening. "You wouldn't understand. This industry chews people up, Adrian. I was protecting you from yourself, keeping you from flying too close to the sun by cutting my wings." He shot back. For a moment they just stared at each other. Alara realized he wasn't going to bury this. The mentor-protégé bond they once had was gone, replaced by something colder and irreversible. The board meeting that followed was swift and brutal. Adrian, with Marin by his side, presented the evidence in front of senior leadership. The footage, the metadata, the pattern of sabotage, all laid bare in meticulous detail. Alara tried to defend herself, framing her actions as preventative measures and misguided attempts at guidance. But the damage was done. The room was silent except for the quiet tapping of a pen as the board chair leaned forward and said, "You've betrayed the trust of this organization, and more importantly, the people in it." By the end of the day, Alara's access was revoked, her position terminated. Her once celebrated reputation collapsed in hours, leaving whispers of betrayal in every hallway she had once ruled. Adrian, though vindicated, didn't feel triumphant. The victory was bittersweet, shadowed by the knowledge that the person who had shaped his career had also tried to destroy it. But one thing was certain, he was no longer the naive mentee who had first stepped into her office. Alara's departure sent shockwaves through the company. Whispers followed her name like a shadow. Colleagues who once sought her approval now avoided her entirely. Her network, once unshakable, began to crumble. A few allies reached out privately, offering sympathy, but even they kept their distance in public. Meanwhile, the story leaked beyond the company walls. Industry forums and professional groups debated the scandal, some expressing disbelief, others claiming they had long suspected Alara of being too calculating. Invitations to conferences, panels, and interviews vanished overnight. In her quiet apartment, stripped of the title she'd clung to for years, Alara replayed the confrontation with Adrian in her mind. She told herself she'd only acted out of fear of irrelevance, of watching someone younger replace her. But deep down, she knew it had been envy, pure and unrestrained, that had led her here. For the first time, she realized the applause she'd once craved was gone forever, replaced by a silence she couldn't escape. For Adrian, vindication brought relief, but it also left a hollow ache. Clearing his name didn't erase the months of doubt, the lost opportunities, or the betrayal that had nearly ended his career. Still, he moved forward. With Marin's encouragement, he began taking on new projects, this time with full control over his work. He was cautious but more confident, no longer blindly trusting authority. The experience had sharpened his instincts, teaching him that even admiration could hide dangerous motives. His keynote at the next industry event was a quiet triumph. The audience listened intently, and when the applause came, it was genuine. Not the polite clapping of formality, but the resonant sound of respect earned. Afterward, several senior figures approached him with offers. Adrian accepted only those that aligned with his values, determined not to repeat the mistakes of blind loyalty. Months later, Adrian was leaving a conference when he spotted a familiar figure sitting alone at the hotel bar. Alara, dressed in a muted gray suit that seemed to drain the color from her, nursed a drink without looking up. Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. She gave a small, ironic smile, not of malice but of recognition. In that fleeting exchange, neither spoke. There were no apologies, no accusations, just a silent acknowledgement of the past. Adrian walked away, feeling no need for closure. The truth had already spoken louder than any words could. He realized then that her downfall hadn't been caused by his actions, but by her own inability to control the jealousy that consumed her. Back in his office, Adrian reflected on everything that had happened. He understood now that mentorship, like power, was a double-edged sword. It could shape you into something greater, or carve you into something smaller. Marin became a trusted partner in his work, her loyalty proven in the moments when it mattered most. Together, they built a team founded on transparency and shared success, ensuring that no one in their circle would face the same kind of betrayal Adrian had endured. The scars of the ordeal remained, but they served as reminders, not of weakness but of survival. Adrian's story became a quiet cautionary tale in professional circles, a reminder that not all enemies announce themselves, and that sometimes the people you admire most are the ones who fear your rise. One evening, as he wrapped up a presentation to a group of young professionals, he offered them the advice he wished someone had given him at the start. Learn from those who came before you, but guard your own path. Respect your mentors, but never let them write your story for you. As the audience applauded, Adrian smiled, not because of the recognition, but because he knew he had reclaimed his narrative. And if you want to hear more stories of ambition, betrayal, and redemption, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss the next one.